Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really getting into something I think almost everyone feels sometimes. It's that weird gap, between knowing exactly what you should be doing, but finding yourself, well, unable to actually do it. You look at that task, that goal, maybe you hear this little voice asking, why can't I just get motivated?
Mm-hmm. And if that sounds familiar, I really want to start by saying you're definitely not alone in feeling that way. And more importantly, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with you. It's not about being lazy. It's not some failure of willpower. It's actually a much more common and frankly more complex thing happening under the surface, biologically and emotionally.
Absolutely. And that's really our goal for this deep dive, isn't it? To move past those easy labels like laziness. We want to explore what the science, what psychology actually tells us about self-motivation. And maybe guide you toward finding a way to build that drive from the inside out, one that works with how we're wired, not, constantly fighting against it.
Precisely. And we're looking at this through a lens that's, well, compassionate and trauma-informed, because motivation isn't just about ticking boxes or pure discipline. It's so deeply connected to how safe your nervous system feels, how much compassion you can have for yourself, and whether you trust yourself. The real aim here is to kind of dismantle that myth of laziness and offer a new way, a more empowering way to think about changing behavior.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. Motivation. We throw that word around constantly, but what is it actually? What's going on when we feel motivated, or conversely, when that feeling just seems gone?
Well, at its very core, motivation is essentially the psychological energy that drives us to act. But here's the crucial thing to grasp. It's not a stable personality trait like being shy or outgoing. It's much more like a current dynamic, always shifting. It gets influenced by our biology, definitely our emotions, the environment around us, even our thoughts and beliefs. It's way more intricate than just wanting something badly enough.
That makes a lot more sense than just seeing it as a switch you flip on or off. And I know we often hear about two main types, internal versus external motivation. Can you break those down for us? Why is one often seen as maybe more sustainable?
Yeah, definitely. Think of it like sources of fuel. On one side, you have external motivation or extrinsic. This comes from the outside world. Things like looming deadlines, the promise of a bonus or a good grade, maybe avoiding criticism or judgment from others. These things can get you moving in the short term, sure. You pull the all-nighter, you put in the extra hours, but relying on them tends to lead to burnout or even just avoiding the task altogether eventually because the drive isn't really yours. Then on the other side, you have internal motivation or intrinsic, and this is where the real gold lies for long-term engagement. It bubbles up from within. Genuine interest, deep curiosity, finding meaning in the task itself, or simply enjoying the process. This kind of motivation is much more sustainable, much more fulfilling. It taps into those basic human needs we all have, like autonomy, feeling like we have a choice, competence, feeling like we're capable, and relatedness, feeling connected.
That internal motivation really does sound like the ideal state. But you mentioned something earlier that feels really key about our nervous system's role. How does feeling safe or unsafe in our bodies connect to accessing that internal drive?
This is such a critical insight, particularly from a trauma-informed view. You basically cannot access that deep, sustainable internal motivation if your nervous system is stuck perceiving threat. When your body's alarm system is ringing, whether because of a real danger or something like the fear of failing or being judged, all your energy gets rerouted to survival, fight, flight, or freeze. Your resources aren't available for pursuing big goals, being creative, or finding joy in things. They're focused on getting through the perceived danger. And that's exactly why just telling yourself to push harder often makes things worse. Your biology isn't designed to pursue growth when it thinks it's under attack. It's designed to keep you alive.
Wow, so it's less about forcing the motivation and more about creating the internal conditions, the safety for it to naturally arise. That's a huge shift in perspective. Okay, talking about internal conditions, let's zoom into the brain. Dopamine, we hear that word a lot, often linked to pleasure, right? But you're saying its role is actually much bigger than that.
Exactly. Dopamine gets mislabeled as the pleasure hormone all the time, but that really misses its main job. It's much more accurate to call it the motivation molecule, or maybe the pursuit chemical. It's the key neurotransmitter that fuels the brain's drive system, that urge to go after rewards. And here's what's really interesting. Your brain doesn't just release dopamine when you get the reward. It surges when you anticipate it, when you imagine getting it done, even when you just make a little bit of progress towards it. It's all about the seeking, the wanting, the journey. But, and this is crucial, that system can be thrown off balance. Things like chronic stress, past trauma, even just long-term burnout can significantly mess with how your dopamine system works. When that happens, it literally becomes harder to feel motivated, to feel excited about things. You might experience anhedonia, that's finding no pleasure in things you used to love, or what feels like executive dysfunction, struggling with planning, starting things, focusing. These aren't moral failures. They're signals of nervous system distress impacting your brain's basic drive circuits. It can even make you crave things like scrolling endlessly because those give tiny, easy dopamine hits without requiring real effort.
So it can actually be a physical chemical reason why you feel stuck, not just a lack of desire. That leads us to another layer, doesn't it? Beyond the chemicals, there's often a really powerful emotional piece tied up in motivation struggles. It's not always just about discipline.
Oh, absolutely. A huge, often unseen part of why we struggle to get going is tied to our sense of self-worth. If somewhere deep inside you carry a belief that you're not really capable or maybe not deserving of success or that you're just bound to mess things up, well, your brain might actually try to protect you from confirming those fears. It subtly discourages you from even trying so you don't have to face the potential pain of failure or disappointment. It's a really tough cycle, the brain trying to keep you safe by keeping you small. And shame plays a massive role here too. Shame is that incredibly painful feeling that tells us something is fundamentally wrong with me. You can often hear it in the background noise of motivation blocks. Thoughts like, why even bother? I'll probably fail anyway. Or other people manage this. Why can't I? Or that constant nagging feeling, I should be doing more. I'm falling behind. These aren't just negative thoughts. They often echo internalized criticism, maybe from way back, where love or approval felt conditional on achieving or being perfect.
That really resonates. And it connects to procrastination too, right? That thing so many of us fight, we usually think of it as just getting distracted, but you're saying it can be something much deeper related to that threat response.
Yes, very often. Procrastination isn't always about finding something more interesting to do. Frequently, it's actually a nervous system freeze response kicking in. Think about a task that feels really big or scary. Maybe it's writing something important, having a tough conversation, even just tackling a huge mess. If your brain flags it as threatening in some way, emotionally, socially, maybe just cognitively overwhelming, it can literally initiate a shutdown. You might feel your mind go blank, get foggy, or you might even conveniently forget you were supposed to do it. This isn't you being weak-willed, it's a basic survival mechanism. Your body is basically saying, this doesn't feel safe, hitting the brakes now.
That just makes so much sense. It connects all these dots. The nervous system, the emotions, the brain chemistry, showing how feeling stuck is often a physiological response, not a character defect. It's incredibly validating, especially if you've spent years blaming yourself. Okay, if you're finding this deep dive helpful so far, maybe consider subscribing or leaving a comment. We love hearing from you. All right, let's shift the gears slightly. We've established why just pushing through or relying on willpower often doesn't cut it. We're taught that willpower is key, but it has real limits, doesn't it?
It really does. Willpower isn't this infinite well we can just draw from endlessly. It's much more like a battery or a muscle gets depleted, especially when you're already dealing with a lot of emotional stress, if you're mentally tired or just chronically overwhelmed. Trying to force yourself through sheer will when your system is overloaded often just leads to what you could call goal fatigue. You just run out of steam and feel defeated. And think about that common pattern. You start something new, you feel that initial burst of excitement, that's the dopamine rush, right? But then inevitably, challenges pop up, the initial buzz wears off, and you hit a wall. If you don't have tools to manage your stress response or reframe those setbacks in a healthy way, it's so easy to fall into avoidance. And then, of course, comes the shame spiral, which just makes it harder to start again.
Yeah, and that cycle often feeds into what I think of as the all or nothing trap. That mindset where if you can't do it perfectly, you don't do it at all, or if you slip up once, the whole effort feels pointless.
Exactly. So many people get caught there. It's that rigid thinking. If I can't dedicate 3 hours perfectly, I won't even start. Or I missed my workout yesterday, so this whole week is ruined. Might as well give up. This kind of black and white thinking, which again often has roots in past experiences where maybe mistakes weren't tolerated, it almost guarantees a cycle of intense effort, followed by burnout and then just collapsing. The way out isn't usually more rigidity. It's actually more flexibility, more self-kindness.
So the big takeaway here is we need a different strategy, a strategy that works with our messy human reality, not against it. And that leads us perfectly into the tools, the practical trauma-informed strategies that can help us actually rewire our approach to motivation. Let's start with what you called the foundation, self-compassion. Why is being kind to ourselves so much more effective than the self-criticism most of us default to?
Self-compassion is foundational because it fundamentally shifts your relationship with yourself from one of conflict to one of partnership. Dr. Kristen Neff's research shows this really clearly. Self-compassion consistently motivates people towards growth and change far more effectively than self-criticism. Why? Because self-criticism activates your brain's threat system, which actually hinders learning and problem solving. Self-compassion does the opposite. It creates a sense of safety. So practically, instead of that harsh internal question, what's wrong with me? When you're struggling, try asking, okay, this is hard. What do I need right now? What would actually support me? Maybe try writing yourself a short note as if it's from a wise, kind future version of yourself, offering understanding. Or just talk to yourself with the same warmth and encouragement you'd offer a good friend in the same boat. Physiologically, this is powerful. It lowers cortisol, that stress hormone, reduces the fear response, and helps bring your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, back online. It shifts you out of survival mode into a space where you can actually make choices.
That feels like such a gentle yet powerful starting point. And before even tackling the task itself, you mentioned checking in with our bodies. Why is tuning into our physical state so important for motivation?
Because your body holds so much wisdom about your current state, and ignoring it is like trying to navigate without a map. Before you launch into a task, especially one you're resisting, just take a moment, pause, check in. What do you feel? Are you jittery, tense, maybe a bit agitated? That could be fight or flight. Or do you feel heavy, sluggish, maybe numb or disconnected? That might be a freeze or shutdown response. Maybe just totally overwhelmed, like you're floating. Once you have a sense of that state, you can use really simple tools to gently shift it. Things like box breathing, that's inhale for 4, hold 4, exhale 4, hold 4, can signal safety. If you feel frozen, sometimes gentle shaking or even just tensing and releasing muscles can help move that stuck energy. Grounding works wonders too, feeling your feet on the floor, noticing textures, maybe splashing cool water on your face. The principle is simple. Regulate first. Help your body feel even a little bit safer, calmer. Then your thinking brain has a much better chance of engaging with the task. You can't just willpower your way out of a physiological state.
Okay, regulate first. But what if, even after trying to calm the nervous system, the task still feels completely overwhelming, like a huge mountain? You talk about micro goals. How small are we talking here?
Yes, big goals can feel paralyzing, especially when you're already feeling depleted or anxious. So the idea is to focus on what we call minimum viable steps. These are actions so small they almost feel, well, silly, but they break the inertia. Instead of write the report, the step might be open the document and read the title. Seriously, that small. Instead of clean the kitchen, maybe put one dish in the dishwasher. Instead of go for a run, maybe put your running shoes by the door. The key is to make the barrier to starting incredibly low. And then this is crucial, acknowledge that tiny step. Celebrate the fact that you did something, however small. This starts to build momentum and retrains your brain to associate action with a little bit of success, rather than overwhelming dread. It helps create a positive feedback loop instead of the usual negative one.
I love that lowering the barrier almost ridiculously low. And that links to another big one, how we view failure. We're so conditioned to see it as proof we're not good enough. How can we reframe that?
It's such a damaging belief, isn't it? But in this more compassionate, trauma-informed approach, failure isn't a verdict on your worth. It's just data, information. It's feedback. It's how we learn. So instead of that inner critic screaming, you failed, try shifting the thought to something like, okay, that approach didn't quite work. What did I learn? What could I try differently? Or maybe this feels really hard right now, and that's okay. It's hard because it matters to me. Or even just acknowledging setbacks are part of the process. Every attempt teaches me something. And often, digging a bit deeper, that intense fear of failure isn't just about the task itself. It might be tied to older, deeper wounds, fears of rejection, not being loved, being shamed. Healing involves acknowledging those old fears gently and slowly creating new experiences where trying, even if imperfectly, feels safer.
These are all such practical, doable things, steps you can really start trying out today right where you are. So we've covered the hurdles and some powerful tools. Let's talk now about really reclaiming motivation, connecting it to something deeper, identity, purpose, maybe even play. How does shifting from a list of shoulds to connecting with our why make a difference?
It makes a huge difference. When you're operating purely from shoulds, you're running on external pressure, which, as we know, isn't very sustainable. But true, deep motivation ignites when you feel an emotional connection to why you're doing something. So ask yourself, why does this actually matter to me? What kind of person am I becoming by engaging with this? What deeper values does this action align with? For instance, instead of I should exercise, maybe it's moving my body connects me to my value of feeling alive and taking care of myself. When your goals resonate with who you want to be, with your core values, you tap into that powerful intrinsic motivation. That's the fuel that lasts.
And I really like this next point, making it playful. Because let's be honest, a lot of the tasks we dread feel heavy, serious, like chores. How can we inject some lightness back in?
Exactly. And trauma, chronic stress, they often steal our ability to be playful. So reclaiming motivation can also mean intentionally reclaiming that sense of lightness and curiosity. You can experiment with this. Maybe set a timer and turn a mundane task into a mini challenge against the clock. Put on music that energizes you while you do paperwork. Find ways to add novelty. Can you do the task in a different location? Can you use colorful pens? Maybe create a fun power playlist just for that task, or a little jar where you put a bead or a coin for every small step completed. Playfulness actually boosts dopamine, it sparks curiosity, it builds resilience, and importantly, it signals to your nervous system that effort doesn't always have to mean drudgery or danger. It can actually be engaging.
These all point towards some really fundamental shifts in how we talk to ourselves and approach things. Can you maybe summarize a few key mindset shifts, like contrasting the old way of thinking with this newer, more therapy-informed approach?
Sure. It's like upgrading your internal operating system. So the old thought might be, I just need to push myself harder. The reframe becomes, I need to get curious about what's making this feel hard and what support I need. The old thought, I should be able to do this easily. The reframe, okay, what's the actual barrier here and how can I gently work with it or around it? Ditching, I'm so lazy. And replacing it with, I might be feeling overwhelmed. Maybe my nervous system is dysregulated, or perhaps I'm feeling scared underneath. And that big one, old thought, if I fail, it proves I'm not good enough. The crucial reframe. Failure is just feedback. It's part of learning, part of being human, part of healing. You see how these shifts really change the game. They release you from that prison of self-judgment. They turn goals from something you have to achieve perfectly into paths for self-discovery, self-understanding, and honestly, self-compassion. And how do these shifts really empower us long-term?
I think it's because you stop fighting yourself. You start working with yourself. You're not just chasing an outcome. You're actually building a kinder, more resilient, and ultimately more effective relationship with yourself along the way. It's a completely different journey. Okay, before we wrap up this deep dive, we know questions often come up around this topic. Let's try and tackle a few common ones, drawing on everything we've discussed. First up, why do I keep procrastinating, even when I actually care about the task and want to do it?
Right, that paradox. As we touched on, procrastination, even on things you value, often masks those deeper roots: fear of failure, fear of judgment, perfectionism, or just feeling completely overwhelmed by the task's scope. It's frequently a protective mechanism kicking in because the task feels threatening in some way, precisely because you care about the outcome. It's not about lack of desire, it's about perceived danger.
Makes sense. What about if someone feels totally numb or emotionally flat? How can they possibly get motivated from that place?
Yeah, that numbness or flatness is often a sign of nervous system shutdown, maybe burnout or depletion. Trying to force motivation from there is like trying to start a car with a dead battery. The first step is always nervous system regulation before action. Focus on anything that gently helps you feel more present in your body: slow breathing, gentle stretches, maybe focusing on a comforting sensation like a warm mug or a soft blanket. Even a tiny shift towards feeling a bit more grounded is progress. Then, and only then, aim for one tiny micro-action. Don't expect a sudden surge of motivation. Just aim for the smallest possible step forward.
And how can you tell the difference between burnout and just a regular lack of motivation? They can feel really similar sometimes.
They definitely overlap, but burnout is typically a more profound state of exhaustion. Physical, mental, emotional, resulting from prolonged stress. It fundamentally drains your capacity. If you suspect burnout, the absolute priority is deep rest, recovery, and addressing the sources of stress before you even think about pushing towards goals. Lack of motivation can be one symptom of burnout, sure, but it can also stem from other things we've talked about, like dopamine issues, shame, fear, even if you're not fully burned out. Burnout requires rest first. Other motivation blocks might respond more to the regulation and reframing tools.
We talked about trauma. Can it really impact motivation that fundamentally beyond just general stress?
Yes, Absolutely, unequivocally. Trauma doesn't just add stress. It can actually change the brain's structure and function, particularly in areas related to reward, threat perception, and motivation. It can dysregulate dopamine pathways and teach the nervous system on a deep level that striving, effort, or visibility feels dangerous. If your past experiences linked effort with pain, criticism, or abandonment, your system will naturally try to protect you by dampening your drive. Healing trauma is often key to unlocking motivation because it restores that internal sense of safety needed to pursue goals.
Does someone need therapy to fix their motivation issues, or can these tools be enough on their own?
Therapy isn't necessarily required for everyone, no. Many people find huge benefit from applying these self-compassion, nervous system regulation, and reframing tools independently. However, if the motivation blocks feel really deep, persistent, or clearly linked to past trauma, then working with a trauma-informed therapist can be incredibly helpful. They can provide skilled guidance and a safe space to explore and heal those underlying patterns that might be subconscious or difficult to tackle alone. It can definitely accelerate the process.
And last question, for someone listening right now who just feels completely overwhelmed by all of this, maybe doesn't even know where to begin, what's the absolute first step?
Start smaller than you think possible, truly. One single conscious breath, noticing the air come in and go out. One kind thought toward yourself, like, this is really hard right now. Or one tiny microaction, just one. Open the email. Put one sock in the laundry basket. Write one word. Momentum doesn't start with a giant leap. It starts with the smallest, most merciful step forward. Give yourself permission for it to be tiny. That's where change begins.
So if you've listened this far, and if you've ever battled with motivation, please take this in. It is not a reflection of your character. It's not because you're weak or inherently lazy or undisciplined. As we've really explored today, motivation is this incredibly complex dance between our biology, our emotions, our sense of safety, the echoes of past experiences, and maybe even hidden shame.
But that is absolutely not the end of the story. There is so much hope. You can learn the language of your nervous system and how to soothe it. You can rebuild trust in yourself step by step. You can learn to look at setbacks as information, not indictments. And you absolutely can reconnect with what truly matters to you, finding that internal spark again.
It's about shifting from fighting against yourself to partnering with yourself, approaching your goals and yourself with more compassion, more curiosity, and ultimately more courage.
Think of it this way. Motivation isn't the roaring fire, it's the initial spark. And the more you can gently honor your own humanity, your own needs, your own struggles, the easier it becomes to nurture that spark, to light it again and again and again.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. We truly hope this conversation offers some new perspectives and tools for your own journey of self-discovery and growth. If it resonated, perhaps share it with someone else. We always appreciate hearing your reflections in the comments too. Until next time.